Wow, I can't believe we're here. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 7th edition of the RotoWire NFL podcast, brought to you by WynnBET. I'm Joe Bartel. Alongside me, as always, on Tuesdays is Jake Letarski. We've done it, Jake. We've gotten to this point. We are now, less than 3 days away from the official start of the NFL season. This is finally the pre-week one Waiver Wire podcast, the podcast we'll be doing throughout the rest of the year. I'm excited to finally embark on this with you.
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke that they throw us into the fire in like July, like, hey, make up some topics and talk about them because we need our football podcast. But this is really what we're here for. This is what you and I have been doing for 2-3 years now. I've done this show for 5 years. This is the Waiver Wire. This is what it's all about. This is where leagues are won and lost. So thank you for tuning in. You're already taking the first step to winning your league.
Yeah, we had the at least we can pat ourselves on the back with James Robinson last year. We were pushing Justin Jefferson heavy last year too, and those guys probably ended up being league winners for a lot of different people. It wasn't just because you and me, but we were
league winners and possible like $1 keepers too. I mean, it makes a difference for this year and years beyond as well.
Hopefully we'll be able to uncover a few of those players and, that hopefully, that depends on injuries, right? And we don't want major injuries to occur, especially now, but
we've already had major injuries occurring here. So we've got guys that are going to help because of that. So we're addressing that right out of the gates week one.
Absolutely. Yeah. We'll get you all covered on that. And again, throughout the rest of the season, we've now officially hit that point. Every Tuesday around this time, we're taking you through the waiver wire pickups that you need to win your league. Before we really dive into that and some of the other news and notes from really Monday and early morning Tuesday, let's get a word from our sponsors, WynnBET. If there's one thing here we appreciate at RotoWire, it's making good decisions, and even more so, making the right decision. Listen up, folks. I have an incredible offer for you with RotoWire's newest partner, WynnBET, the premier digital casino and sportsbook app. WynnBook is now the exclusive sponsor for RotoWire's fantasy podcast, and WynnBET brings you all the latest action with a user-friendly interface, moneyline bets, boosted parlays, over-unders, round robins, live betting, and so much more right at your fingertips. If you want to break from sports betting, head into WynnBET's digital casino and take a spin on roulette, double down on blackjack, slam the slots, or try your hand at baccarat. WynnBET is currently available in 6 states: Colorado, Indiana, Michigan, New Jersey, Tennessee, and Virginia, while rapidly expanding. At WynnBET, the possibilities are limitless. WynnBET is currently offering all RotoWire listeners a risk-free bet up to $500 on your first wager. Download WynnBET now. That's WYNNBET. WynnBET, the exclusive partner for RotoWire's fantasy podcast. Okay, so I talked about some of the news and notes that's occurred late last night into today. Normally, as we're doing this podcast, we'll kind of be recapping the Monday game right around there. So in 2 weeks, I will be likely hungover and at least very tired after the Packers-Lions game, which I will be going to.
You got that one?
For sure I'm going Packers-Lions Monday Night Football, so long as I can convince the wife to take the baby for a little bit. And
I haven't talked my dad into giving me those tickets yet. Yet is the key thing. All I got is Christmas Day. I will be spending at the Mecca Lambeau Field to watch the Packers take on the Browns, but that won't be the only one, I'm sure.
That's going to be a good one as well, too. But, again, every Monday, like every Monday night game, we're recapping here at this point. But right now, no Monday night game yet. Unfortunately, we're still waiting until Thursday for the official start of the kickoff. So there's a little bit of news and notes that we can go on to. And, I think we first have to start with the fact that Saquon Barkley and Clyde Solaire look like they're both ready to play week one. And I assume, at least what we've seen from other beat reporters, they're going to be getting the workload that we anticipated, which is to say most of it heavier workload than maybe there was reports. Yeah. What have you been seeing?
Yeah, the question is with Saquon Barkley, really, right? Because he hasn't had a ton of contact. He's worn the red no contact jersey for much of practice. Maybe he had a little bit of contact this week, didn't play in the preseason. And the thing is, they turn around and they play the Thursday night game the following week, right? The Giants do. So will they limit him? It would seem, I'd be absolutely shocked if he got 25 carries in each of the first 2 games. Not that they have necessarily much behind him, but I wouldn't necessarily, I'd go as far as to say maybe Saquon Barkley isn't a top 10 back for week one, just because of that little bit of uncertainty.
Yeah, I actually have him ranked outside the top 25. I might bump him up a little bit with this news. I think it's going to be a situation where they would be wise to play it a little bit safer, smarter, both with Barkley, and they have a passing game that should be able to be effective enough. They certainly have enough weapons around him. And there's going to be questions at the offensive line with the Giants too. And I think we're not going to have those answers. And really the answers to whether Barkley was worth a mid-first round pick, which is kind of where his draft season ADP is going to end up. I don't think we're going to really find those answers until a month and a half into the season.
They have weapons too, but I'm just looking at the Giants depth chart on our website right now. And granted, a lot of this stuff will sort itself out for week one. Not all of them are going to be out by any means, but right now we have Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph, both the tight ends. tagged with questionable. Kenny Golladay, Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney also tagged with questionable. Now those statuses could very well get cleared up Thursday's practice, but it's a banged up team here. And assuming Barkley goes, the touches should be there, but we don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, and one other thing to point out, the Broncos defense is going to be pretty good. I would not be surprised at all if by, whatever it's PFF or some other metric decides that the Broncos defense by the end of the year is a top 5, top 8 unit overall. And, especially the pass rushers, whether it be Chubb coming back healthy, whether it be Von Miller coming back healthy, can they make the difference? Because we know that secondary is very stout, and even the middle, the linebackers for Vic Fangio's defense is going to make an impact for the Broncos. If you have not already targeted a streaming defense for week 1, and for me it's been the 49ers against the Lions, I think the Broncos make a lot of sense and are probably available. We're going to get to more of those streaming defenses and kind of your strategy over the next 2 weeks as we get later in the podcast. Other week 1 news to note, we also have DeAndre Swift, DJ Chark, Hunter Henry, and Noah Fant all look like they are going to be good to go for week 1. Obviously different teams, different situations, but more or less you're saying, hey, the star guys that you're drafting, they should be available. Thank goodness.
Yeah, there's not a discussion to be had on each and every one of these guys. I mean, they're quick hitters here. DJ Chark, I think, is someone who has been, slipping oddly. If you looked at Mario's underdog column that I tweeted about yesterday, he's been oddly slipping, and I got him for under $10 in a salary cap draft I did. I can't explain it. I don't know why, but anyway, he'll be good. I think he's a great flex option week 1, depending on your league. And of course, DeAndre Swift is probably the biggest news out of that whole group of quick hitters we hit, because there was a lot of uncertainty with him for week 1. And, the Jamal Williams hype balloon inflated quite a bit. So all these guys are looking like they're going to be good to go.
I have a couple of other projects I need to get done today. So it's possible I might miss this, but I'm going to be going, I love to do this on Twitter and just go over all the different rosters I have and the shares of different players throughout that is like, hey, here's what I had. Last year's Justin Jefferson is one of my guys. The year before that, Lamar Jackson. I think this year, I mean, obviously it's going to be Trevor Lawrence. Of the non-dynasty and keeper leagues, I think I have him in everyone. And almost by default, I've kind of completed a Jaguar stack too. So I've been getting a lot of Chark. And if he goes off, that's fantastic, but it'll be more because I've been targeting Trevor Lawrence than anything else.
Well, I mean, Chark's the number 1 there. I don't think anybody can question that, at this point in time. I did a little survey of my shares too. And of course, Deonte Johnson, who I've been typing up, I have by far the most, but I ended up with more Justin Herbert than I thought. I think I see him in that second tier of quarterbacks where maybe a lot of other people don't see him. So I took him a lot as of thinking I was getting the last of a tier. So that'll be interesting. I've got a week 1
start against Washington.
Yes. I know. I was going to say I've got a little bit of a dilemma because our next news bullet that we wanted to hit there. Look at that transition. Wasn't it beautiful? Tannehill is back from the COVID list. Looks like he's going to be ready to go week 1. So now I got to decide, do I start Tannehill against Arizona or Herbert at Washington? And that Washington defense is pretty nasty. The more I think about it, they're going to get after Herbert for sure. And I've got a decision to start across 3 leagues now of what I'm going to do.
I would go Tannehill. I know it's kind of crazy to say, especially given the draft compensation you and others might have taken in Herbert. I'm not convinced this offense is going to look fantastic. The Chargers, at least week 1. And I do feel very confident that Washington defense is going to be energetic and frantic. And there's going to be some issues up front. Brian Bulaga, not that it's a surprise to us as Packer fans, likely isn't going to be available week 1 for the Chargers. At least it sounds like he's going to be really iffy. I know they've improved their offensive line, but it's not going to be as dramatic as people might suggest. I would be willing to take Tannehill, especially with that Julio Jones injection into that offense, and comfortably start him ahead of Herbert. I think I had Herbert around quarterback 12 or 13. Yeah. Tannehill was an easy top 10 selection for me too. And that being said, Trevor Lawrence as well. I'll keep pushing him against that Texans defense. I don't care. Week 1 start. Yeah. Give me the rookie quarterback over Herbert as well too.
Yeah. So there's my biggest dilemma. Of course, if you guys are out there on Twitter, I'm at Roto Jake. He's JB Fantasy Sports. We're definitely down to help you guys out with questions. And look at that. Joe's got one in the comments for us.
Yeah. I just queued up the one question we have right now here as we're streaming the podcast live. Trey asked, do y'all think I can start Henderson and Robert Woods together in a full point PPR? His bench has Jerry Jeudy, Kenny Golladay, Myles Gaskins, Juju Smith-Schuster, James Conner, and Tyro Williams. I think the Woods one makes sense from a full point PPR perspective. I would imagine Henderson would be the running back too.
Yeah.
Because if he's not, you're not asking these questions. You're getting Holiday, or you're getting Jeudy or Golladay or something like that in there. So what's your overall assessment? It really kind of boils down to Conner, Gaskin, or Henderson.
Yes. Yeah. So for me, listen, when you have two guys on the same team like this, it definitely maybe limits your lineup's overall ceiling because obviously not both Henderson and Woods are going to have ceiling games in the exact same week. But I would also argue that, equally it raises your whole starting lineup's floor, right? Because if one guy's good and the other guy's bad, they kind of even each other out. Maybe they both average, 12 points a game, 12, 15. Well, in PPR, it'll probably be more like, 15, 16 points a game for these guys. So definitely, I think Woods is pretty much a must start until you see him otherwise. I mean, I don't think highly Galladay is banged up going into week one. Judy has a ton of upside, but
I need
Woods
to see it first.
Yes, you're right. Woods is the way safer play week one. Juju, kind of a flex guy. James Conner, a backup. Tyro Williams maybe emerges into a flex guy. I know he's your guy. We like him a lot.
He's my guy. Yeah.
But okay, so the other thing here is, if you believe any of the coach speak lately, Myles Gaskin has been getting a ton of love. He's trusted in the passing game, which is a big thing for head coaches. You obviously need to keep your quarterback upright, your young franchise quarterback upright. And if you can trust Gaskin to do that, it's looking like he's maybe leaning more towards an every down back. And I know we were down on Gaskin before. There were all various other factors. Malcolm Brown's in there to maybe poach a goal line carry or two. But Gaskin's a player whose stock was going down right up until the start of last week, and now it's starting to creep back up. So I don't know if that makes him a 5th round pick now. Of course, depending on your format, maybe there's a situation at some point during the season when you consider Gaskin over Henderson, especially if Henderson loses carries in that LA backfield. But for now, no problem starting Henderson, Woods week one. Raise the floor of your lineup, and one of those guys will produce for sure.
Yeah, to me, it's Henderson or Gaskin again. If you're assuming that you need a running back 2 in that spot, I'm fading Connor until I see it. That's going to be a prove it until I play type of situation. And despite the fact that Henderson's going against the Bears defense, I actually am a little bit more worried about Gaskin going against the Patriots defense. Everything you talked about Gaskin is 100% correct. And actually, if you were following the Dolphins beat writers, that hype train that you were seeing towards the last week really had been carrying on throughout most of the preseason. I think Gaskin is going to be a huge factor in that passing game, but I don't like him against the Patriots. So I'd rather have Henderson as my running back 2. I'm not used to, he's asking Henderson the flex. And if that's the case, if it is Henderson more in the flex as opposed to running back 2, I would much rather have Jerry Jeudy as my flex in a full point PPR format than Henderson. So let's change it up for you, Jake. You get these running backs or wide receivers. You can pick anyone you want in flex or not. What's your call then?
So for week one, let's see here. I'm still going to say
I'm taking Jeudy against that Giants defense. I'm going to go ahead and say risk it for the biscuit. We'll get Jeudy in there over Juju Smith-Schuster, who'd be my next guy.
I'm going to take the floor, and I'm going to take Henderson now that I think about it. I like Jeudy, have a good season overall, but I want to see what his usage, what his snap share, and what his target share is in week one. I'd rather take the floor of someone that's getting 10, 15 carries.
I appreciate that. And honestly, the pre-waiver wire week one edition is a little bit light on guys to actually pick up. We'll get to a few more of these names in a bit. So I'm not used to getting so many questions. We'll get another one answered here by MP 1606 here. He asks, what do you think of this team? Jalen Hurts, Antonio Gibson, David Montgomery, Robert Woods, Keenan Allen, I guess another Woods and Kelsey. And this is full point PPR. I'm not sure what the double. Amari Cooper would be subbed in there. That seems like a pretty good one to me. You have the running backs, obviously the 1-2 combo, and getting Montgomery a little bit later helps, which allows you to get the Keenan, Woods, and Cooper combo. That's one of the few instances where I've seen Kelsey as the first round selection likely have a pretty good team at running back. But what do you think about that?
I mean, my first thought was like, is this an 8-team league? Because a lot of teams that use their first round
team,
pick,
I'm sure.
10-team, yeah, okay. A lot of teams that use their first round pick on Kelsey, I've seen have a pretty glaring weakness at one of the positions that needs to get addressed early with Fab. This doesn't seem to be the case here. I feel like people maybe let Robert Woods slip a little bit because he's not the most glamorous, exciting player, although he's consistently productive. People maybe let Jalen Hurts slip a little bit too, even though he's got, top 5 QB potential. I guess theoretically it's there. We like Antonio Gibson on this podcast. Yeah, I mean, I don't see anything. I don't see anything wrong. I mean, I love this. What do you think of my team with no context at all?
MP was just trying to brag, right? That's what MP was just doing in that question. He's like, hey guys, look at this amazing team, X. And you know what? I'm all for it. Let's promote the flexing on this podcast. I keep talking about Justin Jefferson and James Robinson from last year. I'm totally fine for that. All right. Before we touch on the quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends, you need to pick up ahead of your drafts. Let's go ahead and get a word from our sponsors, Blue Wire. All right, we're back. So quarterback is where we're starting. Again, for those unfamiliar with the show, when we're looking at free agent pickups to suggest or recommend, we're not going to be that podcast that says, hey, go pick up Aaron Rodgers. He might be dropped in like a 4-team league or something like that. We're always trying to target players under 50% rostered on Yahoo. It's just the easiest way to look at the roster
Yahoo
percentage thing.
And ESPN too. Those are, there are a lot of other great formats out there, of course, but those are the two most popular. So we use that as kind of a litmus test of, whether guys are going to be available or not.
So that might not apply to your 14-team leagues, your 16-team leagues, or whatever else if you are listening to the show. But for the most part, these are guys under 50% rostered on Yahoo formats as kind of our place marker of start. So we'll go to that with Jameis Winston, now the officially announced starting quarterback for the Saints. Of course, missing tons of weapons. I've seen the Marquez Callaway hype get completely out of hand, but he is one of your pass catchers for the Saints, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit as well, too, as far as pickups. And he's going to be starting against the Packers in Florida, obviously because of the hurricane displacing the Saints in New Orleans. He's at 43% rostered. How do you feel like Jameis Winston's going to fare against the Packers?
I think he'll fare fine, mostly because he's going to dump off to Kamara a ton. I'm actually starting to think about taking Kamara number 1 in one of the drafts that I have in tonight, but I'm going to get to that later. More of a McCaffrey exposure thing. No, I actually really like Jameis, unless your league is one of those crazy ones that wants to take away 6 points or something for an interception. I think we're going to see plenty of his old self. But, I'm a little concerned about the weapons week 1 wise. I know everybody's hyping up, Callaway, his I feel like we should talk about him in the receiver section, but his ownership is crazy off the charts. It doesn't meet our thresholds at all. But if you drafted a month ago and
he would have easily been available. Yeah.
Today or tomorrow is your first waiver wire pickup, then definitely he's available and he's worth someone to look at. But Traequan Smith is questionable. Adam Troutman is questionable. A lot of guys, if you scroll through the depth charts, you're going to see a ton of questionable tags this week. Deontay Harris is maybe a factor. Obviously, Winston's value rises a ton eventually when they get Michael Thomas back in October. But out of the guys that aren't available, if you need a quarterback 2 or maybe, even a quarterback 1, I think that he's someone that you can viably pick up and play in and out and play the matchups a little bit and get a lot of production out of this year. It wouldn't shock me the least bit if Jameis Winston ends up as a QB1 this year. By that, I mean QB1 is in like top 12 quarterbacks. That wouldn't surprise me one bit. He could be in the comeback player of the year running. That wouldn't shock me at all. I should look at the props on that here. But
that's like plus 2,000 at best, or at worst, I should say. Like that's a way sleeper for that. And only because there's a few other guys that are just going to be pretty obvious candidates for that role, much like Alex Smith was last year when he came back. I've been touting Jameis Winston as a QB1. Again, you mentioned like top 12. Yeah. For much of the year, even before it was announced that he was actually the starter, like that meant no brainer. I was getting shares of him in best ball leagues in the NFFC in around 20. And like, where would he be going now in one of those? Probably around 12, 13, 14. It's crazy to think what we've come to. As Packer fans, and specifically what I've seen in the preseason, Winston is going to carve up that defense. I don't think you're going to see anything remotely close to a viable defensive option for a couple months. And I think it's just going to be, the scheme is going to get sorted out, seeing where these guys get turnover wise, things like that. I don't think they're going to be very aggressive. So I really believe Winston's going to be tearing apart that Packers defense. And whether or not you think there's going to be some added pressure for the Saints to perform well, given their hometown situation, playing for the crowd, playing for New Orleans, I think that matters too. I really like Jameis Winston as a DFS play this week.
I was going to say there's a nice DFS stack here, because if you stack Jameis with maybe a Callaway or a Traequan Smith that are going to be really cheap, you always want to get the comeback on your DFS stack. So, that makes it easy to put someone like Devontae Adams in there.
I think throwing for 250 and 2 touchdowns is going to be the minimum for him. And you mentioned Callaway, fine enough. That hype seems to be ridiculous to me. But I even think like Kamara and Latavius Murray are going to both be doing things. Murray's been a Packers killer for a number of years, but he was back with the Vikings too. And I could see him being a factor whether or not Kamara is catching pass or not. So I like Jameis Winston a lot for this week if you are in a 2 QB format. Most likely, as you're entering week 1, you've already got your starter. If you're like Jake, who's debating between Justin Herbert or there's another, like Jalen Hurts plays the Falcons, you're playing Jalen Hurts. But there's a few of these other top 10 QBs. Maybe Winston's the guy you pivot to in these more difficult situations. So the other quarterback to mention, Mac Jones, is at 26% rostered on Yahoo. Going against the Dolphins defense this week. Obviously, we talked about him last week when they beat out Cam Newton. one of the biggest free agents in the market right now, but that means Mac Jones is your starter. I'm not eager to pick up Mac Jones this week against the Dolphins, but there are certainly times throughout the season you can make it work. Where are you at with Mac?
There's definitely a risk reward balance here that you have to take, because could he be this year's Justin Herbert? Sure, he could be. And last year, if you punted quarterback and stocked up the rest of your skill positions with depth and ended up adding Justin Herbert later on, that was probably a league-winning move. So I'm not saying he is this year's Justin Herbert, but what if he is? So, he gets a spot on here. I put him above the 2 quarterback leagues here that we're going to talk about next for a specific reason, just because he can grow into it. Again, I'm not super optimistic on the Patriots this year with a rookie quarterback and not a ton of pass catching weapons, at least at the wide receiver position. So, the long-term outlook isn't great, but if you don't have a second quarterback, or if you have, dead weight, like, any of those guys that went on IR and you're not quite certain about that position, or you're in a 2, I'd imagine Mac Jones was taken in most 2 quarterback leagues, you would think.
Earlier in drafts, maybe not. I mean, I think it's very possible that over the last 2 weeks, 2-3 weeks for sure. But if you were drafting in early August, there was not this indication that Mac Jones was going to be the starter in week 1 by some point in the season. Sure. But yeah, that's going to be the key. I mean, this is what makes this podcast tough in particular, balancing the people that did the drafts early August until the ones that are doing it right now, because there are vastly different ranges from that ADP. Let's move over to those 2 quarterback leagues that you mentioned. So we have listed Carson Wentz, Teddy Bridgewater, Jimmy G, and Tyrod Taylor as like the 4 guys, obviously the low end starters at the moment. So Carson Wentz is the highest rostered of that group, going against that Seahawks defense, which we know has been vulnerable against the pass. Where are you with Carson Wentz against that defense?
I mean, before his injury, I was starting to think, maybe I'd like him as quarterback 2 or something when in leagues where I punt quarterbacks. I wouldn't feel terrible about going into the season with him. Now he's going to be back week 1. He doesn't have T.Y. Hilton, it seems like, and for multiple weeks, actually, I believe they put him on IR. So yeah, the weapons are down. Can he get by with, Pittman and Pascal and Campbell and those types of guys? Maybe, but they're going to get by with the running game heavily. Carson Wentz, out of all these guys, seems least likely to lose his job 3-4 weeks in mid-season, whatever. So that
mainly because they have crap behind them, right? I mean, like, are you really jacked to start Jacob Easton? No.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, so he went from barely being drafted, or he went from kind of being drafted and late to not being drafted at all when we thought maybe he'd be a pup candidate, to now he's kind of back in the mix here. So obviously for your 2 quarterback leagues, he was probably taken there. There's some value this week against Seattle. It depends. So I can't think of too many guys you necessarily bench for Carson Wentz, but just in case he ends up in that comeback player of the year running, there's some ceiling here. So I'd throw him on here. He was the one that I thought maybe about putting in that next tier, but we ended up dropping him into the 2 quarterback league tier.
Of those other guys mentioned, again, Bridgewater, Jimmy G, and Tyrod Taylor, I actually kind of like Jimmy G with the idea the Niners are going to win by 30 against the Lions. They're probably having Mostert run for 2 touchdowns, but I think Garoppolo is going to have one of those like 180 and 2 touchdowns on 85% completion percentage kind of range. That's
like a 15 totally for 18 game, because they run 40 times.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's again, they're going to be ahead by a significant amount early on. I think that's one of those perfect situations to play Jimmy G. And it might be one of those few situations where you can, because obviously Trey Lance is waiting in the wings. He's got that finger injury, hasn't been practicing yet. It sounds almost guaranteed that Jimmy G is starting this week. Kyle Shanahan was kind of doing that. Ooh, I don't know. Maybe I might not play him, but he's going to play him.
I don't think Trey Lance was even throwing this week.
Right. No, he hasn't thrown yet because he's got the broken finger or messed up finger right now. But either way, they were doing like I don't know if you'll play. Like, no, you're going to play Jimmy G, especially against the Lions. Come on. Alabama beats the Lions right now. I know you're like scoffing at that, but
yeah, right.
Don't even this is a really bad team, Detroit is, and we're going to find out real quick when the Niners eviscerate them. So I like Jimmy G as a play. What about you, though?
I'm fine with Jimmy G. Again, it depends on what you got. 2 quarterback league starts, sure, but I'd have a tough time, getting him in the top 15, which means the guy you drafted is probably ahead of him.
All right, let's move over to the running backs. And actually, it's a good jump to another one of our comments from Brett asking, what percentage of my waiver wire funds should I use to bid on Tyshon Williams? And who do I drop if I do get him? Michael Carter, Rondale Moore, or Amon St. Brown? So I pull up this question only because Tyshon Williams, is going to be one of those guys probably most picked up in week 1. And I don't think it's close, right? Especially if the news of Justice Hill, boy, has torn his ACL on top of J.K. Dobbins being done for the year too. you're talking about Gus Edwards and just about nobody else. I mean, it was reports yesterday the Ravens were looking at Devonta Freeman of all people as your
they brought in
third-string running
Le'Veon
back.
Bell and
Right.
Devontae
It's like,
Freeman
oh boy, if
to
those are
work
the
out,
options are going down to, Tyson
no
Williams
Todd
is
Gurley,
gonna
no
be,
Todd Gurley, he wasn't brought
not
in.
yet, not yet.
Yeah,
Tyson Williams is going to be a
never
guy
say
that
never.
you want to roster. So he's at 27%, at least on Yahoo, 18% on ESPN. They're facing the Raiders, so Gus Edwards is going to eat for sure. I could see Williams also being effective. What percentage are you putting on him?
Yeah, so since I wrote this outline last night, Williams is up to 31% Yahoo and 20% ESPN. So slowly rising as more first come, first serve leagues get their fab in. And this is a tough call, right? Because we don't know a ton about him, number one, right? You know, we have an undrafted free agent that the book's not out there. He's just there because of opportunity. And, you know, even if the skill isn't that much, I talk about that skill opportunity balance a ton. Here's what I'm thinking here with Tyson Williams. I'm hesitant in case they sign someone else, and we know Gus Edwards. We're thinking, you know, timeshare split at first, because even if J.K. Dobbins was going to be the guy there, right, Edwards was still going to get, you know, 5 to 10 carries a game just because that's how the Ravens run. So what can you bank on 5 to 10 carries a game? Is he an actual startable player, or is he more of, you know, the handcuff word that we like to talk about for Edwards? So I think I'm comfortable bidding 17% personally, 17%. And I know that's going to be a little bit low for most
What
people.
a random number, 17%.
Well, because I think of it this way, right? $15, you know, 15%, right? But you want to go a percent or two higher. So 17%.
Okay, you know, you're right. That makes sense.
Is what I'm thinking. I will place bids out for him. Now, to actually get him, I think you're going to need to be more in the range of 32%, or at least 24% minimum. So I don't see myself picking him up a ton unless I'm in a first come, first serve league that I can go ahead and drop him immediately.
That's a good point.
So
my thought is in the higher money formats. I think of the NFFC. I'm in 2 different leagues for that. You're going to have to invest a little bit more in your budget to get Tyson Williams overall. I think there is league winning upside if situations break their way, and given the Ravens backfield right now, things are breaking his way where he could be a potential roster guy. So investing 30% of your budget seems aggressive, but if you want to win a higher end league like that, okay, makes sense. In your friends and family league, and I imagine most people are listening to this are not, you know, preparing for $200 entry fee leagues and things like that. I'm a little less aggressive in that. In a 10-team league, he's probably one of the last guys on your bench, if at all. It's going to make a hard situation. So, like, to Brett's question, do I drop Michael Carter, Rondale Moore, Amon St. Brown? Like, that's a pretty healthy group of players. I'm dropping Rondale Moore out of that group only because I don't know what his playing time is going to look like. But down the road, I could absolutely see Rondale Moore certainly has a talent to be effective. Amon St. Brown is going to be in a situation to be a PPR threat right away, which is the only reason I'm keeping him around. But it's a difficult situation already, and that's like a 12-team league, I imagine.
I 100% agree with you when you say you should cut Rondale Moore. Again, number 4 on the depth chart here. I just don't see it. I don't see where the hype for him has come. This is a 5'7" guy, you know, who is 4th on his team on the depth chart in our rookie season. You know, he might get a carry here and there, might get a couple slot targets, but I just don't see him being a viable part of this offense. And I don't know if he can physically hold up in the league. So
yeah, and he's running the 5-yard curl routes by Cliff Kingsbury too.
Explain to me why everyone's drafting him.
AJ Green's dead, and they don't like Christian Kirk. That's how I would say it. You know, those 2 reasons.
I guess if you had to do it. See, I like what you said. Amon St. Brown actually has a path to targets here. You know, because what Quintez Cephas is number 2 on their depth chart here. I'm okay with him.
How dare you? Tyro Williams is. Well, Tyro's 1. You're right.
I was going to say Tyro's number freaking 1, unless you count TJ Hawkinson.
Tyro's 1 through 5. What are you talking about? He's going to be amazing this year.
Yeah, no, exactly. But so I mean, at least Amon St. Brown there's a viable path to getting a couple targets, and I don't see Rondale Moore ever being fantasy relevant this year. So in that case, yes, I'm bidding. I don't know, 20%, give or take 3 or 4, depending on how bad you want him. I just don't see, like, I don't think you can buy Tyson Williams and then pick him up week 1. And and then start him week 1.
Right.
He does. Right. Are you confident enough to flex him week 1? I don't see that at all.
No, I completely agree with you, but he has more league winning upside than I think a Rondale Moore does, even in the right situations working for Moore. I'd rather have Tyshon Williams and does now turn into that very clear backup handcuff, whatever word you want to use for Gus Edwards. A couple of quick hitters for the running backs too. We have Tony Jones, who really got a lot of sway over the last 2 or 3 weeks with the idea that Latavius Murray was going to be cut. Well, Latavius Murray's on the team. Tony Jones is on the team, so therefore Jones is kind of fallen off. He's at 6% rostered on Yahoo, even less on ESPN, again, going against that Civ-like defense of the Packers. And you have Wayne Gallman, who was cut by the 49ers and then signed by the Falcons, immediately falls into a situation where he actually might not be that bad of a roster at 4% on Yahoo, 5% on ESPN against that Eagles defense. Week 1, of course, Mike Davis, your obvious starter for the Falcons. Both of these guys are pretty clear backup candidates. I would much rather have Wayne Gallman. I think he's got a very much easier path to playing time than Tony Jones, but I haven't seen the same hype for Jones that others have. So maybe I'm just a little bit lower than I should be.
Yeah, Gallman was at least serviceable in a handful of games for the Giants last year after the Saquon Barkley injury. I'm by no means advocating picking Gallman up because you definitely can't pick him up and start him week 1. He's interesting after the Falcons. You know, obviously Mike Davis is their number 1 guy. They're going to lean on him. And they parted ways with this. I'm going to
Quadre Olson.
Allison? There's
Allison,
an I in there.
Yeah. Allison. Yeah.
Quadre Allison. Okay, so they parted ways with him, who, that was a confusing move to a couple of our analysts over here. But, nonetheless, that makes him the number 2. Again, not a guy you pick up and start week 1. Neither is
Who's
Tony
the only
Jones.
backup for the Falcons besides that, right? Like it's Cordarrelle Patterson. If Cordarrelle Patterson's your 3rd string running back, you are very clearly going to have some value if you are Wayne Gallman as the backup to Mike Davis. That's the bigger key to me, right?
Yeah, you know that, and that's fair enough here. Sure, I'm surprised they haven't tried to sign anybody or tried to.
The Falcons are dumb. That's the only way. Right.
Yeah, no, I don't get this, but in any case, I don't know. In the end, you look at the player, and it's Wayne Gallman, and okay, it's a very vanilla move here. Now, Tony Jones, we don't know much about. Could he be good? Yeah, he could possibly be good. I think Tony Jones carries a little bit more, higher risk, higher reward. Somebody that if something were to happen to Kamara, suddenly that role could go nuts because Latavius Murray, that he didn't get cut, he made the team, but the fact that those reports were floating around definitely made it seem like Tony Jones was coming up the depth chart, and he would be, in the event that Kamara misses a game or something, I think he would almost be a similarly attractive player to Murray. Murray probably gets the goal line carries, but who knows? Maybe Jones is a little explosive and can do some damage here. So these are guys that you can't pick up and start week 1. But if you drafted a month ago, you've got some dead weight on your roster, almost certainly here. I got to make a J.K. Dobbins move this week. If you drafted T.Y. Hilton at the end or something like that, there's a lot of situations in which you might have dead weight on your roster. I mean, ETN, of course, and if you're doing waivers this week, some leagues are deeper and you're going to have a hard time. Make $1-2 bids on these guys. It doesn't cost you much, or it doesn't cost you anything really. And it's someone to stash on your bench that could have more upside than a guy who's sitting on IR. That's the point that we're trying to make.
I'll give you a situation quick, then we'll move on to the wide receivers because we have plenty of questions rolling in. We also got things left to do on our breakdown for today. I drafted Xavier Jones in enough places that I'm like, all right, the backup to the Rams got placed on IR. It sounded like one of those, we're just going to protect this guy situations. And maybe Xavier Jones comes back and plays at some point this season. That's the easiest roster spot for me. And there are a ton of those running backs. Gerald Doakes was another guy, at least in our dynasty format for the Dolphins, like a 4th string guy that got cut. Okay, great. I will pivot to a guy like Wayne Gallman right away in those instances as my last roster spot, somebody who has the potential to go off if a situation works his way. And I like that more than Tony Jones, even though they are the same type of player. So before we get to the wide receivers, a word from our sponsors, Fantasy Stand. Playing fantasy sports is so much fun, but once you dive deeper, fighting against other players for a percentage of the pot, well, there might be sharks. Even when your fantasy team crushes it, those skilled pros may leave you without a single cent. Luckily, the days of having a great score and not getting loot are over. With Fantasy Stand, you're playing against the house. If you reach the threshold, you win. It's that simple. To participate, choose a free or paid entry contest in the lobby. For salary cap, you have to pick 9 players while staying at or under the salary cap. And for pick'em, you simply pick 1 player from each tier that they're presented with. Done. Now sit back and watch the results to see if your fantasy team has what it takes to stand up from the rest. Come out as the higher score. We'll get ready for additional prizes. So where do you stand? Visit fantasystand.com to sign up today. We have a lot of questions regarding streaming defenses. Guys, I promise we'll get to them at the very end of the podcast. Normally there isn't so much interest in them, but I have a couple of doozies for you, not for just this week, but for next week too. While we continue through it, let's get to the wide receivers. There was not a lot of depth at running back, but I think your got a lot of buying opportunity at wide receiver. Probably should start first with a guy like Terrace Marshall. You have Terrence again. Is he just going to be called Terrence for the rest of his life? Are you going to be a Terrence Marshall guy? He's Terrace.
Yeah,
Terrace
you know
Marshall.
what? I think some of that might be the autocorrect. Google Docs or Google Sheets loves to.
So Jake's trying to find his cop-outs already with this. No, he's going to be Terrence Marshall for both you and I for the rest of the year. But yeah, the now clear slot receiver, it seems like, for the Panthers offense.
Yep.
LSU guy obviously knows the offensive coordinator, Joe Brady, during their time 2 years ago. I love Terrace Marshall. I think the talent is there. I kind of wish he wasn't playing the slot. I think that could have been more of DJ Moore and the Robbie Anderson on the outside. If Sam Darnold is even half the type of quarterback that you and I both think he can be, Terrace Marshall will 100% have value right now. And at 90% rostered in Yahoo, 20% ESPN, you're talking like 10-team leagues that just are going to have him in the waiver wire. I think he is going to be a fantastic wide receiver 5 or 6, certainly a depth play, and one that can do in certain matchups week in and week out.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I looked. This one was featured in Kevin Payne's article. I didn't quite tout that enough, but he's got a weekly waiver wire. He does the written form of it every week on RotoWire, and I definitely check that out. That's live on the website today, of course. RotoWire.com/try. You can see below to see all of our. I'll get the pointing right there. We go. But anyway, so I pulled this from there because I've seen everybody's posting their drafts. All these analysts that I follow on Twitter posting their drafts, and everyone's taking Terrace Marshall in the end. I wouldn't have noticed if it weren't for Payne's article that he's only rostered in 20% of these leagues here. So
because we're always taking him.
Yeah, I know, because we're always taking him. Now we talked. I don't need to necessarily break down a ton about what kind of player Terrace Marshall is. I think he's got a ton of upside. He was my first round pick in the RotoWire Dynasty draft. He's just. I was just surprised to see the ownership level that low. And there's tons of if you're not going to go the Tyshon Williams route, I would almost say that Terrace Marshall would be over Tyshon Williams in this case here, because I don't know. I really like him as a player, and you can kind of slide under the radar. If your league didn't draft him, hopefully he's still under the radar, and it's someone that can definitely help you out.
He's not going to have Justin Jefferson numbers. I think people have to really temper those expectations. I feel like okay, fine. If you want to go that route, you can. But I think a lot of people are seeing these rookie wide receivers and be like, oh man, who's going to be the next Justin Jefferson? There has to be situations that work out. I mean, the Vikings literally had Adam Thielen and nothing else from a pass catching perspective, and they were going to be throwing the ball often on these plays that were going to be in favor of the wide receiver, because Dalvin Cook would always do well on a play action basis, right? Like you have to, as a defense, focus on Dalvin Cook first. The same doesn't really apply for the Panthers. They have Robbie Anderson, who's an established guy. They have DJ Moore, an established guy. You have Christian McCaffrey, who does really good.
DJ Moore, an established underachiever. I had him last year. It was brutal.
Fine. You can call it whatever you want, but he's established enough for that offense. That isn't going to be the situation that Terrace Marshall walks into. Nevertheless, he is a talented guy given a role that has value in the NFL. That's all that needs to be said for a reason to have him above 20% rostered at the moment.
Yeah, maybe you don't see a week 1, but week 5, 6, Odell Beckham like breakout where he shows you something with his hands. Now the volume was never huge at LSU, but he, back-to-back years with double-digit touchdowns despite catching less than 50 balls both of those years. So, at a 20% plus touchdown rate, he'll find a way to score. He'll find a way to produce.
Yeah, you say Odell, and then you're like, oh, maybe he could be Justin Jefferson. Temper your expectations, everyone. Jake is going off the crazy train. I can't help you there. I mean, he's not going to be doing that necessarily, but you should have him on your roster just in case he ends up being a pretty clear wide receiver 3. I think that's best case scenario.
To go back to that last question, like I have him way above Rondale Moore and way above Amon St. Brown, like significantly above both of those guys that you were, that our last questioner was thinking about dropping there. So I don't know. That's where I place him.
Yeah, you had broke up a little bit there, but you take Terrace Marshall over Rondale Moore, you take Tyshon Williams over Rondale Moore. Would you take Paris Campbell over Rondale Moore at 11% rostered on Yahoo right now, 38% on ESPN, which is weird. You now have a healthy Paris Campbell going against that Seahawks defense. We talked about Carson Wentz and his value. I will say this, I got into a pretty good argument. There's never bad arguments on SiriusXM, but a good argument with Mario on the Friday show. He was campaigning that Paris Campbell is the number 1 wide receiver for the Colts, not Michael Pittman. I think Pittman's pretty good, but he was saying, well, everyone just says Pittman's already the number 1. That's why you're not realizing Paris Campbell is. We got to see Paris Campbell be healthy, and he's also going to be an outside wide receiver, at least initially, compared to Zach Pascal in the slot, which is what the Colts depth chart revealed. I think Paris Campbell is certainly worth rostering more than 11%, but maybe not more than 38%, which on ESPN.
Yeah.
So it's weird, the ADP difference.
This is a team that's going to be based on short passes significantly. So how much does that leave really for the outside receiver? I don't see it. I mean, I'd rather. So here's what Paris Campbell is to me. Without T.Y. Hilton for the first couple weeks, he is a safe, not super exciting play. So you get him for the first couple weeks. Maybe he gets 6 to 8 targets, catches 5 or 6 balls, gets you a serviceable PPR score to, drag your lineup along and keep you somewhat competitive as opposed to, taking a 0 at that position here. Terrace Marshall, on the other hand, is someone who I see has high upside breakout opportunity. I just don't see with Paris Campbell. Very rarely do I disagree with Mario. I just don't like the team setup for that. And, and again, the injury risk too. So, again, take it with a grain of salt because Mario's probably smarter than this and me, but I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, many people have lost money betting against Mario. I actually did decide to make a bet with him on that, although we haven't really actually, figured out the qualifications for it. Doesn't matter. He doesn't like our Culver's. He doesn't like our Culver's boards bet that you and I do all the time.
I don't think he eats meat, so that's the issue.
That makes some sense. Okay, so other wide receiver Nelson Aglor at 30% roster, 35% I should say on Yahoo, about the same in ESPN. Against the Dolphins, we have N'Keal Harry on IR. Bill Belichick was talking nice things about him, despite the fact that he was asking for a trade only a month prior. You have Jacoby Meyer, who I'm surprised is actually rostered him over 50%, doesn't meet our qualifications in both formats. But I think Aglor is also a situation that needs to be near that point. You and I both don't like the Patriots. I think everyone else is aware that the Patriots are not one of our favorite teams, especially offensively. But Aglor is going to have a pretty significant role, and I think as a deep threat specialist on that team, that matters when they're going to be running the ball quite a bit and likely will have some play action opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, Aglor last year with the Raiders, it was the second most targets of his career, the third most targets of his career, but he tied for the most touchdowns with 8 and had the most yards. He was, it was his best yards per catch year ever. Now, you could call that big play dependent, but, he's a guy that's maybe figured something out at the age of 28. He's definitely not past his prime. I trust Belichick to sign the right players in this situation. And Aglor was less exciting with Cam Newton based on what we saw of him throwing the ball last year. And now, there's uncertainty, and you just bet on that uncertainty, and maybe one of these bets pay off. So, Aglor is a good player. I think to me, he's more established than a guy like Jacoby Myers. So, there's he's a lot better than a lot of that other dead weight or unknowns you're carrying at the bottom of your bench there. And maybe he turns into something, because if he even mirrors last year, which might be a little bit of a stretch, but I mean, last year, 48 catches, 896 yards and 8 touchdowns. That's more than a rosterable player for the entire season here. And his circumstances have just improved incredibly. So I think he was an option at least to include on this list.
So just to reiterate, you're taking Nelson Aglor over Rondale Moore?
Yes.
You're taking Paris Campbell over Rondale Moore?
That's one where it depends on team needs. Do you need a guy to flex week 1 out of desperation, or do you want to hold on and maybe think about upside just in case Rondale Moore proves me wrong? So it depends if you need a spot to fill week 1 or not.
Okay. I think it's important. There has to be a line for somebody, and we're more or less picking on our guy Brett here, but I think this is a situation where we're trying to outline who would we rather have in these situations, so you could play it out as well for your leagues out there. And if you are drafting today or tomorrow, you can have those situations in the back of your mind. Tight end was also a little bit thinner, and it will be throughout most of this podcast year when it comes to different pickups. I think there's a way to capitalize on the Irv Smith news likely out for the season. The Vikings then traded for Chris Herndon, I think for like a 4th round pick or something like that. But they also have Tyler Conklin around. Our guy Jerry Donabedian has been saying Tyler Conklin's going to get decent amount of targets. He's out there blocking 90% of the time. By default, he'll be pass catching. And we know Chris Herndon has been disappointing during his tenure with the Jets. One of those two, I think, could be a tight end too, especially if you're in like a 2 tight end league or a super flex league that needs tight ends out there. I like one of them to do enough this season, but I'm not sure which one I like more. So can you talk me into one direction or another?
Yeah, maybe Herndon's the better pass catching athlete, but Conklin is going to get the work early. I see him getting the 3-down work early. He was the guy that they went to, with Kyle Rudolph pretty much out last season. He got his first touchdown. I mean, the most he's ever had is 26 targets in a season, and that was last year. So theoretically, the 5th round pick out of Central Michigan here is ready to take that step up. 26 years old. He'll get the first chance as the incumbent. And does that mean he's someone that you pick up and start over most of the tight ends? Probably not, but he could develop into something. And with tight end being such a wasteland, why not try to take a chance on the guy early?
I agree with you. Yeah, especially Herndon. I'm with you on that one. I think the upside for Conklin's a little bit different, but it's hard to. I want to see it. I mean, there's a lot of really interesting week 1 situations, and when we do this podcast next week, we'll probably be having completely different thoughts. And like overreaction Tuesday, we might as well name our podcast that for next week. But I'm excited to see where a lot of these situations end up going and usage rates. And of course, you can go on rotowire.com/try for a 10-day free trial, see all of the different stats and things that pop out there as you go through different player profiles. I think of the snap counts, route run, things like that are really relevant information that you can have out there too. So otherwise, on the tight end news, Evan Ingram and Kyle Rudolph are both uncertain for week 1. Ingram's dealing with a calf injury. Rudolph is still dealing with a foot injury that kept him on the PUP list for most of the preseason. And again, we talk about the Giants offense as a whole with Saquon Barkley. It's I think the pass catchers are going to be the most important thing, which is tough because the Broncos defense is pretty good at stopping the pass catchers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I wrote that note down on here with Ingram and Rudolph being both questionable just because, I'm not saying jump on Caden Smith is the only guy left, but, we serve some pretty deep leagues, so you never know. But I think it was Ingram. One of those two guys was trending towards playing as of when
it's Ingram, I think.
Yeah, Ingram is starting to look like he'll be able to play. So maybe that was a little bit of an outdated bullet point, but just throwing that out there. Ingram will be like this all season. So if you want to gamble and play that mess, then go for it.
Right there with you. One last word from our sponsors, Vivid Seats. Preseason football is wrapped up, and we're ready for the regular season to kick off this week. Live events are making a comeback, and there's no better place to be than Vivid Seats to get back into the action. So grab your NFL tickets and cheer on your favorite team from the stands. Man, that does feel great to say. Even better, they just launched a new and improved rewards program with free tickets for every fan. Earn rewards, ticket upgrades, and perks just for shopping. If you're looking for tickets to the game, your favorite artist, or that new show everyone's talking about, Vivid Seats has it all. Visit vividseats.com or download the app today. Visit Vivid Seats, experience it live. We actually are using Vivid Seats, my wife and I, to go see the Michael Bublé concert, which was rescheduled from last year's pandemic. We are now seeing it next week, Tuesday. So,
I used Vivid Seats on Saturday. My brother and I couldn't believe it. We got for the Badger Penn State game. Obviously, that the outcome didn't go as we wanted to, but we got 50-yard line, row 9 for $130.
Wow,
$130 a pop. That included all the feeds. He woke me up at 6:30. Hey, should we buy these? Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, we got to do it. Yeah.
And then I walk into the stadium drunk later, and I'm like, whoa, what did we do? This is awesome.
That's great. That is fantastic value. I will say that the Michael Bublé tickets, not nearly as great a value. And also, like when we bought them a year and a half ago, we didn't have a kid. She wasn't even pregnant at the time. So it's just kind of a weird situation that, all right, now we got to find a babysitter to go see Michael Bublé when we're, that's one of my wife's favorite artists out there, probably the favorite. So I'm looking forward to it too. It's only my second concert ever. How embarrassing is that this will be
your second concert ever?
Dude, second concert ever. Yeah, you probably like 200, right?
Yeah,
I think it's one of those things where
I go every chance I get.
I shouldn't reveal it to people because I always get mocked for it. But rounding out the rest of the show, we have some streaming defenses, and it's great because we've had a few questions. Carlos is God want to know who of these defenses would you pick, a Panthers defense or Browns defense? He has the Chicago defense currently going against the Rams. We have on our outline here Jacksonville going against the Texans and Vikings against the Cincinnati Bengals. Jacksonville's at 3%, which makes sense, and Vikings at 24%, less so. But in this situation, would you rather have Panthers D or Browns D? Browns going against the Chargers Chiefs, and the Panthers defense, I want to make sure I have it pulled up here, going against the Jets.
Okay, so you got to throw out the Browns against the Chiefs, right? Is that that's even a question? So toss them
maybe
for
the
away.
sacks, you could get like a 2 points for the sacks, get 6 points maybe.
I guess it depends how many points you lose for giving up 38 points. So I don't care. Nobody can stop.
I agree.
Okay. So now we're looking at the Bears. They've got some big playability here, but I guess it's not Goff anymore. It's Stafford, but they know plenty of Stafford. No, I think the automatic pickup here is the Panthers because they're the home team and they get a rookie quarterback in the Jets here. And we know what a mess the Jets have been for the last couple of years. I think you got to go Panthers here.
All right, well, let's play this out then. So Brett's asking about the Colts, Vikings, Jacksonville, or Falcons defense. And you were discussing as well, like the Vikings defense against the Bengals. I think of that group, I would take the Vikings. Falcons against the Eagles, Jacksonville against the Texans, Colts against the Seahawks. Like, I don't want the Colts defense against the Seahawks. I think the Vikings makes the most sense in the situation.
See, yeah, no, they're both. It's between the Vikings and the Jaguars for me, and those are the top two teams I wrote down as streamers because the Vikings only at 24% owned, Jaguars at 3% owned. Man, that's really a toss-up. They're both road teams. Normally, I'd take the home team in that situation. I'm going to look to see. It could come down to me something as easy as the lower over-under of the week, and it's going to get there. So I'm calling those odds up now to see if I can find that. But
well, while you're looking that up, I'll still take the Broncos against the Giants if the Broncos are available. And I have to imagine in a lot of situations they might be. I'll take the Broncos over every one of those defenses. They're a top 10 defense for me this week. Wait, do you have the odds before I was going to go into my week 2 spiel because I'm excited for that.
Let me see here. So we have Minnesota and Cincinnati. The over-under is looks like 48 on that game. And the Jacksonville-Houston is 44.5. And I believe 44.5. The Jets-Carolina also 44.5. That's going to be the lowest of the week. Miami-New England is 43.5, I guess. So it's not but I'm not going to advocate necessarily grabbing a defense. The Denver Giants is 42. But so no, both the Panthers, like we said in the last question, and the and that Jacksonville. You could take either side of the Jacksonville-Houston game, to be honest here, because you either got Tyrod Taylor and a complete lack of weapons, or you have a rookie quarterback with some decent weapons. But I don't know. I think I'd probably go. Oh, geez, yeah. Panthers. I should have put Panthers on the list to start with. I'm going to put them number 1. And then after that, it's such a toss-up between the Vikings and the Jaguars. Give me Vikings and then the Jaguars, but it's very, very close.
Okay. I'm with you on the Vikings one, and I'm a little bit worried about Jacksonville, even though it is Tyrod Taylor playing. It's tough. I'll take the Vikings defense over that. One thing, note, when we were doing this pre-waiver wire week 1 podcast, it's never too early to plan for week 2. And I'm saying this now because we did have a user just ask, should I pick up the Browns defense? They're going against the Chiefs. More than likely, somebody is going to either have dropped them after they get annihilated by the Chiefs, or they'll be like, wait, why do I have a defense going against the Chiefs and drop them beforehand? Mm-hmm. Yeah. If that's the case, I would be willing to say a top waiver wire selection should go to the Browns defense, if only because they are playing the AAA team, the Houston Texans, in week 2. And if by some miracle, go ahead.
And they're at home too. So yes, I can see that. Great. I just have such a hard time rostering 2 defenses, man. That's the only thing.
You have a hard time losing or winning that, I guess. I think rostering 2 defenses is the way to go. What are you talking about?
Well, number 1, I never use a high enough pick on a defense that isn't somebody I'm not willing to cut immediately. Maybe this is just the difference in how we play fantasy football. I can't roster 2 defenses at once. So to pick the Browns up this week means you're going to carry 2 defenses when you could grab a guy like, I don't know, Terrace Marshall, who we were talking about, or Tyshon Williams, or any of these guys that could use your roster spot that could be potential league winners down the road. But instead you miss out because you're rostering 2 defenses. I get where you're coming from here, but unless you're never going to see.
I think of a different way. Everyone drafts Travis Kelce in the first round because they have such a significant advantage at tight end. What if I'm telling you will get the number 1 defense for 2 consecutive weeks? Draft the 49ers early. They go against the Lions this week. Great. Number 1 defense already set. You draft the Browns in week 2. Fine. You are set now as the number 1 defense, or you could go ahead and plan for the future and pick up the Packers defense, as Civ-like as they might be, who are going against the Lions on Monday Night Football, first time back in Lambeau with fans for a year and a half. You're telling me that's not worth a roster spot over Rondale Moore? No, I'm taking the defense every time.
Oh, good God. We'll disagree with this like crazy. I mean, look at last year. Miami Dolphins were like a bottom 5 ADP defense, and they ended up being a top 5 in the end. You're going to stumble across one eventually and stick with it. There's no reason to overthink defense. I'd be shooting for upside instead.
That's fair enough. You're wrong, but that's fair enough. We're going to
agree to disagree. There's no way that we're ever going to come to a consensus on this. Getting defenses 2 weeks ahead of time. Jesus.
This is the new wave. Instead of 0 running back, you go 100% defense, right? I'll have a different name for it, but this is clearly the strategy that's going to be league winning. Don't you worry, Jake. I promise you that. Well, that does it for us on the RotoWire Tuesday edition of the show. Obviously, we are now in the waiver wire portion, which is fantastic to say. We'll be keeping you up to date on our win total, over under, stuff like that we did in previous podcasts. And Maybe when we have more time, we can answer some of these rate my team questions so that we're getting trickle in just at the end. If you have,
I'll take Edwards over Ayuk in the flex. By the way,
I was going to say, so Dylan Harvey just posted a half point PPR week 1. Gus Edwards over Ayuk. You're taking Edwards over Ayuk. You're saying,
yeah.
And otherwise, if you have those questions and don't just want to chime into the podcast, feel free to tweet us at JB Fantasy Sports at RotoJake. Will be our obviously our Twitter handles that you can get us at too. I'm trying to answer questions all the time for that type of stuff. So this is again the Tuesday edition of the show, sponsored by WinBet. We'll be back in next week. Breaking down the Monday night action, breaking down week 1 itself, and hopefully having some more waiver wire targets for
games.
you.
We'll have real games. I can't wait. Help us out, rate and review, give the website a try for week 1. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye now.